Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to TPOG, the podcast of gaming presented by TPOG, episode 3. Tonight, we are going to be discussing the games that changed us, and I am joined here today by my good friends Cora
Salutations.
and Oecus.
Hola.
So, folks, obviously in our first episode, we went over how we got into gaming, and I think there might be a little bit of overlap in terms of what we discussed back in that first episode. We discussed a lot of the very first games we played, but some of the more important games that happened to us. But today's episode is more generalized to our entire sort of like, it's a bit of a cringy term to use, about our entire gaming career. The entire time we've been gaming our entire lives. And I've asked Cora and Oecus and myself to pick two games in particular that stand out to them as having changed them as a person, or if that's a little bit too dramatic, just like games that like had a big impact on them in general. So I think anyone who's been gaming over the years and has dedicated a specific amount of time to them will have a couple of these in their back pocket that they can speak of. If not two, they can speak 5 or 10. It really depends on what kind of person you are. But I think everyone has had these sort of experiences, and today we're going to share some of those games with you. And if you've never played them before, go and play them, because they might just well change your life too. Today, we're going to be starting off with Oecus, who has very graciously decided to come along with two, as begrudgingly has decided to come along with two entries this time around rather than several. So, Oecus, why don't you start us off with your first game that you would like to tell us about?
All right. Well, sadly, this game you can't play anymore, and I did mention it before, but that's PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. And this game changed me for the better, I would say, for the fact that it actually made me become a wider gamer. So prior to playing this game, I would always consider myself a gamer, and I had bought lots of games, had multiple consoles. But when PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale was first announced, lots of people on the forums were talking about games and characters they would love to see represented in the game. And browsing those forums and reading people's move sets or requests made me end up finding lots of new games that I never even heard about. One of my favorite games now, currently in series, Persona, was because of PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale. I would have never known about that game probably had it not been for PlayStation All Stars. I'm going to abbreviate it PSA because that's way too much for me to say now on. But yeah, PSA brought my attention to a lot more games and made me play a wider variety, I would say. I found out about games like Parasite Eve, Disgaea, which is another one of my favorite series now. It got me to finally play Killzone. It it made me want to try out the games that they represented, like God of War. Even though that was a big game at the time, I never really cared for it till I saw it in PlayStation All Stars. And I really thank that game for existing because I probably would be playing less games than I do now and wouldn't have found one of my favorite games in Persona.
Yeah, definitely. Just, I mean, obviously, for those of you who might be unaware listeners, the group the TBOG, to Brotherhood of Gaming, started out of PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale. It was kind of the game we all came together to play, and me and Oecus were there in the early days together, one of the very few remaining veterans in those early days, but I had a very similar experience myself in terms of it introducing me to plenty of other games because there were so many suggestions for different games on in the community. So things like Valkyria Chronicles, for example, I never would have played without PSAS, and Killzone, where I got big into Resistance, things like that. So yeah, I had a very similar experience to that too.
Yeah, and building on that, it actually got me into like the internet aspect of video games. So that's where I started actually browsing game forums more often. Um, Prior to that, I don't think I really looked at game forums for any other games besides, going on GameFAQs for a guidebook. I never really interacted with people as much as I did. Um, I actually had one of the most popular move sets in the PlayStation forums from that game, and if I recall, it was for Lightning from Final
I
Fantasy.
knew you were gonna bring that up. Sorry, I just knew you were gonna bring that up.
Yeah, I take pride in that just because after putting that out, I still believe that I'm the reason why a moveset craze happened after that. So yeah, I'm going to take credit for that.
You're claiming credit for
Another
the moveset
aspect,
craze. Oh, hold on now. I think that might be
yes,
a bit much.
I bet you if you look, oh no, the forms
The
are
forms
gone
are
now, I
dead,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm still taking credit for that. I'm pretty sure after I put that out, that's when you started seeing people start making their own movesets, and even people were referencing me. So yes, I'm taking full credit.
So you're taking
Uh,
credit for like specifically the PSAS move craze because I hope you're not taking credit for move sets in general. I have some bad news.
yes, I'm taking credit for the PSS, not in general.
That's good at least. So, what I'm finding quite interesting about this is you haven't really said anything about PlayStation All Stars itself as a game. So, for you, and similarly for me, it was a big gateway to a lot of other games that we went on to really enjoy. But the game itself, as a video game, independent of the impact it had on you, what in terms of the actual game itself, how did you feel about that?
Well, as far as the game itself goes, I've already had experience with games like Smash Bros. And playing Super Smash Bros. I played with people around my neighborhood. I played locally. When it comes to PlayStation All Stars, I do not have any memories of playing with anyone locally. All the people I ended up playing with were people that I met on the forums and through TBOG, but the game itself, I would not say influenced me as much as Smash Bros, for example, did, being a party platform brawler.
Yeah, I kind of have similar sentiments. Like I think for me, I've long said that PSAS is an okay game, but it needed longer in the oven. It wasn't even like the roster I had a problem with. It was just a bit bare bones in general, and the balancing wasn't great, and just stuff like that. It wasn't a bad game. I just found it a bit mediocre. But what it represents to me in terms of like beyond the game itself, it's very similar to what you were saying. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, why don't we then jump onto your second game, Oecus? What have you got for us next?
So my second game is something that I kind of touched on during our first podcast, I think, and it has to be Need for Speed Underground. And in the first podcast, I said how I loved racing games, and I think my first racing game was actually Gran Turismo. But Need for Speed Underground has a lasting effect on me to this day, where any racing game that comes out, I always end up comparing to it or its sequel, Underground 2. And the reason why I say it had a huge impact on me is that that game influenced me to love car culture as a whole. So prior to that, I loved cars. I loved going to the auto show. I just loved seeing different cars like Corvettes, Porsches, etc. I liked racing games, but Need for Speed Underground introduced me to the tuner culture of things. So putting vinyls on your car, putting a spoiler, customizing it to crazy extents, and surprisingly, it was Need for Speed that got me into that and not Fast and the Furious, because I was not allowed to watch those movies as a kid. But Need for Speed is what brought me to like that, and in turn made me want to watch Fast and the Furious. So even to this day, I love seeing customization in cars. That's what made me want to become an engineer. Um, and I thank Need for Speed Underground for existing because I just love seeing the freedom of expression in what people can do for cars. Oh, and it even got me into the show Pimp My Ride. I completely forgot about that show, but without Need for Speed Underground, I would not be into the tuner culture as much as I am now. Even my family laughs at me to this day because I say that I plan on putting underglow on my car, and they said you're probably gonna be 30 with kids and have underglow, and I still say yes, and I probably would not want that without Need for Speed Underground.
I was gonna mention tuner culture when you were talking about Need for Speed getting you into the car aspect because I believe no, I don't remember the perfect history of that game franchise, but I do remember at some point along there they did really hardcore dip into that tuner aspect to try to bring in those fans and probably create some new ones because I do remember they collaborated with some higher profile auto magazines, did some other stuff, so that there was a fairly robust connection between real life tuner culture and the optimization you could do within the game. Um, I'm sure that you are not the only one that could attribute their love of vehicles to that game or to that series specifically.
Yeah, so speaking on that, I recently found out about this, but this part I already knew is that the reason why Need for Speed Underground ended up happening was that Electronic Arts saw that people were loving Fast and the Furious, the first one. And around that time, car culture and the tuner culture specifically was booming, and Fast and the Furious was the one that tried to hone in on that, and then EA said we wanted to do that too. The part that I just found out recently is that if you've ever watched Too Fast and Too Furious, there's a gray skyline with blue vinyls on it, and that became like an iconic car in the series. The person who made that car is also the one who made the iconic skyline in Need for Speed Underground, which was Eddie's Skyline. And they did a partnership to make a real life version of that car, which they auctioned off with a magazine company.
Uh, yeah, that's pretty fascinating. I didn't know nearly as much about that car side. Um, to just remind me, Too Fast, Too Furious is the one set in. Is that the one set in Tokyo? That's Tokyo Drift. Which one's Too Fast and Furious set?
Isn't that the one
That's
with
Is that
the
just the
one that's set in Miami with without Vin Diesel.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought that's the one it was. It's got like the
yeah.
boat chase at the end, right? Where they dive.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. I actually remember that one a little bit.
I do remember a lot because that was early 2000s, so there was a lot of boys our age that were really into cars, myself included. I was more in the racing side specifically, as opposed to the modifying cars side of the house. But I still, there was a bunch of kids in my third, fourth grade class. They're like, "Oh, I want you know X or Y car, whatever was popular at the time. I don't remember now. Like, I don't think GTRs were huge then, but I know that they're pretty big now. But it's like, oh, this is my new dream car, and it was no longer like the sports car. It was like the tuner car, the racer car for like street races. I definitely remember seeing that firsthand.
Suddenly a lot of your GTA behaviors have become a lot more understandable now. You're like, I don't know how many cars you own in there, but you're very, I don't know, souped up cars with like the ugliest paint jobs in the world in your office garage. It all starts to make sense now.
I just wanted to be on the record that my paint jobs are not ugly, people. They're amazing, and he's just a hater.
Yeah, yeah, of course, that's what it is. All right. That's another one that's quite interesting because I think the two that you've explained, they aren't like directly sort of games that just sort of influenced you because they were just incredible games or anything like that. They introduced you to other things and sort of changed your life in a sort of way that moved you in a different direction, I guess, from what you were on, and like introduced you to new things rather than just the game being really good. Which is actually that I actually find that quite fascinating because it's yeah. I guess I was kind of expecting a lot of just like, oh, this game's really good. I really like this game sort of thing, but no, this is a bit deeper and a bit more interesting actually.
Well, so Underground was to me an excellent game. The reason why I didn't talk about it as a game is that I do find its sequel, Underground 2, a lot better, and its other sequel, Most Wanted. So as a game, I did love it growing up. I loved customizing cars in it. I loved racing in it. It was a big difference from that compared to previous Need for Speeds. It's just that there are more iconic racing games for me in terms of Need for Speed. That's why I can't really talk about it from a gameplay perspective.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I like I said though, I think this is honestly a bit. It sounds stupid saying like better, but like it's cooler and more interesting that it's like that they had an impact on you beyond just being the game itself. All right, so why don't we rattle off a few honorable mentions for you, Oecus, before we move on to my segment. So if you could pick like 3 or 4 games in short sentences, why they are in your honorable mention list. Yeah, go ahead, shoot.
All right, so my honorable mentions have to go to Modern Warfare 2, the original, because that's what got me into shooters, and I still play shooters to this day. League of Legends, which got me into esports, and it's probably one of the longest games I've ever played. Little Big Planet, because it got me into more creative side of things, and the Journey soundtrack, I'll give it to that because it made me cry. Even to this day, the soundtrack to that game can make me cry. And last one, The Last of Us, which furthered my love for single player games.
I actually remember you talking about the Journey soundtrack back in like 2013, 2014. It was yeah, I remember you being a big fan of that back then. Okay, cool. So thank you, Wekis, for giving us your sort of segment. So now it's time to move on to me because I'm getting tired of coming last in these episodes. So I'm going to go ahead and go next. So I had a lot of back and forth on which ones I should select, and I wasn't as certain on the one to pick as I wanted to be because there were a lot. There's a lot out there for me that I could point to, and I will get to those in the honorable mentions later. And I kind of feel like I'm chickening out a little bit on this first one because I did kind of go over it in a fair amount of detail in the first episode, but I can't not mention it on the subject, and it is Metal Gear Solid 1. So, for those of you who didn't see that episode, this wasn't my first game, but it was one of my first. The PS1 was the first console I played. I played a bit on the PC before that, but when I got that, and to be honest with you, I can't even remember why I got it. I don't remember if it was gifted to me or whether I specifically requested it or anything like that. I don't remember how I got it, but it showed to me that what the scope of what games could be. Because prior to this, I'd been playing games like Spyro, FIFA, David Beckham Soccer, things like this. Like, not bad games by any stretch, but they weren't like, like serious video games. They didn't really like have that. They were fun, they were charming, they were colourful, things like that. But Metal Gear Solid it told this story, this brilliantly. I still think to this day, I think the story of the first game is so tight and so brilliantly executed, and it doesn't go overboard like a lot of the later games do. And it showed to me that the games can be so beautiful and so amazing and so complex, and there's so many layers you can add to them. And I think a lot of people out there have had the same experience. The first Metal Gear Solid there's so much uniqueness to it, and to this day, I can remember everything about it. I can remember all the guard patrol patterns. I can remember how to beat every boss. I can remember where all the items are. I've played through the game so many times and I love it so much that it's still there. Even though it's been 15, 16 years since I played the game, probably even longer than that for the first time. It's just, there's so many incredible moments. I think even those who haven't played the game will know all about Psycho Mantis and how you need to plug the controller into port 2 to be able to beat him, because otherwise he'll be able to predict your attacks. Just the interrogation sequence, which when I was a kid I could not for the life of me get down. It took me many, many years later until I could pull off that sequence. And obviously, failing that, having to see Meryl die, spoiler alert, that was a big thing for me. But yeah, and just so many elements as well. Just the use of stealth action in general, things like that. Just there's so many amazing elements to it, and it was a massive eye opener of me for what incredible potential video gaming has, and what I could get out of it as a person. And yeah, that was definitely the trigger for me that made me into a gamer, I think.
So, I don't know much about Metal Gear Solid 1, but I have to say the Psycho Mantis thing is like the number one thing that I know for any creative thing that was done in a video game, probably to this day still, I would say. And it's iconic.
I was going to say it's always, I think, a big moment in this hobby when you come across your first game that kind of opens your eyes to it as an art form. I know that because when we started probably our hobbies, that was not the perception. Of course, we have a lot of really good games now that tell very immersive, very beautiful stories that, speak to people on a very common level. But at that time, those were kind of few and far between. So your first real taste of that kind of cinematic, that kind of artfulness is one that's kind of hard to shake.
Yeah, 100%. It's I think a lot of it also significantly depends on when you start gaming in your life. I mean, I must have been like 7 or 8 at the time, and for me, gaming had just been like platformers and stuff beforehand. So to come across something like that was just like, it was like a whole other world. As someone who, as I was as a massive fan of action films and things like that, being able to like play it was just amazing. But yeah, there's a so I will say, if anyone's interested in getting into Metal Gear Solid now, start with 3. It's a lot more approachable. The unfortunate thing about the first game is, as amazing as it hasn't aged the best, gameplay wise and certainly graphics wise. There is the Twin Snakes remake, but I don't like that for reasons I won't get into right now. Maybe on another episode, but yeah. If you were looking to get into it, play 3 first and then play 1 a bit later. But yeah, 1 is just amazing game. And I know it's Konami, and I know they're not exactly the nicest company, but I really hope they remake it one day, like faithfully and properly. I just love to replay that game with like updated mechanics and graphics and everything. All right, so sorry.
I just wanted to say, now you just made me realize, though, during my PS1 to probably PS3 days, I never really experienced a heavy story type game like that. So it's kind of interesting to see as a kid, that's what made you see like a movie in a video game, because I I just don't have any off the top of my head of, story driven video games from that time period.
But inclusive of the PS3 era.
So before I would say PS3 too, because I think my biggest story game ended up being The Last of Us. Prior to that, games did have good stories and stuff, but I don't think any of them were, strongly story driven type games.
Oh, that's fair enough. Yeah, I feel like it's, for me, especially lately, it's become less of a a thing for me that I'm more focused on multiplayer games and stuff, as I'll get into in a second. But yeah, it's something that I felt I personally have moved away from over the years. But Metal Gear Solid for me sort of kickstarted like a big slew of them, of sort of games I got into, like, for their story. But yeah, it's yeah, not really sure where to continue this conversation, to be honest. So I'm going to move swiftly on to my second pick. So this was the one I had a lot of difficulty coming on, and what I'm going to do with this one is come across a game that isn't necessarily like one of my top 10 games of all time or anything like that, but opened me up and introduced me to a new world and a new, like, era of gaming, I suppose, that in kind of a similar way to that Oecus came up with in his segments, and that is RuneScape. So I don't think there's a single, little young lad of our age who didn't play RuneScape growing up. And back when I was, I want to say 14 or so, every fucking guy in my school was playing it. Everyone was obsessed with RuneScape, and it was the thing to be into. Even people you would never expect playing video games would be on it. And looking back on it, it was nuts. We used to just sit there for hours at a time, just clicking trees and chopping down logs, or just clicking the same enemy and watching our guy fight them. It was such a simple game, but due to it being free, due to it being browser based, so anyone could play it, and just due to the fact it was the trend at the time, everyone was playing it. It was the in thing. You played it, and everyone around you was playing it. Everyone at school was, talking about it every single day. And for me, the game itself, while I sank a lot of hours into it, I actually would love to know how many hours I put into it in total, because I don't know, and I wouldn't know how to retrieve that information. But it wasn't the game itself for me, although I did thoroughly enjoy my time playing it. But what happened in that game for me was me and my friend started a clan. And back in these days, this was long time before Discord. It was before Reddit was still in its extremely early days. You discuss things on forums, right? You didn't have chat rooms or anything like that. Maybe Zap was around back then, but it was extremely early days for that. But you did everything through forums, so communication wasn't the best or as like instant as like slick as it is today. But we created this group called the Swordfish Clan. And so much of my life going forward from that point, I have been in a group, a clan, or a group of something or other to this very day, now 16, 18 years later, because it was such a big part, it was such a big thing for me that we got into this group. And even though I was significantly lower level than most of the members of my group, being part of this group, being part of something greater and working towards a big goal, that was incredible. And even when my time on RuneScape came to an end, I moved over to creating a clan on the Wii, or like joining a clan on the Wii when we were playing games like Medal of Honor Heroes 2, Call of Duty World at War, and eventually, obviously, moved on to an obscure little group called PlayStation Avengers in 2012, where we went on to play PlayStation All-Stars, which grew into the Brotherhood of Gaming, and has now been going on for 10 and a half years. And it all started on RuneScape with the Swordfish Clan, and that set me on a path that changed my life. I sometimes I sit there and think to myself, if me and my friend had not decided to make that group when we did, my life might be significantly different than it is today. Just it sounds dramatic, but genuinely I think it would have been, because so much of my day-to-day life has been dictated by being part of these groups and doing things like creating content for them, making for my friends there, that sort of thing. And yeah, I couldn't imagine a life without it nowadays. And it all began back there in RuneScape. And as good as RuneScape was, it's not probably in my top 50 games of all time, maybe not my top 20, but yeah, the journey it set me on is just indescribable and inescapable, and I can't thank it enough for that. So yeah, that's why RuneScape is my number 2 pick.
So my RuneScape story is much shorter. I was at a friend's birthday party for his 11th birthday, and he was really into the game, and he wanted more of his friends to play it. And we weren't like super close. We were in the same classroom and we sat at the same table. You know how that works when you get kind of put together. And I got invited and it was paintballing and I thought that was sick. So after that was over, he was like, "Do you want to play RuneScape?" And he got all of us accounts and he was like showing us how to do the tutorial and stuff. And then I went home and I forgot password. I didn't know how to bring it up to him. Then like I showed up, you know, 2, 3 weeks later, and I was like, "Oh yeah," but I couldn't remember the password. I said, "Oh, it's my birthday," and I did not know how to tell him that I forgot what day that was, and so I never played RuneScape.
That's quite funny, actually. So you didn't play for very long then?
Played it for one night, and I did the whole intro.
Oh, okay. That's fair enough, yeah.
That's a funny story. For me, my RuneScape experience is I saw my cousins playing it, I saw a few friends playing it, and I thought to myself, I'll give it a try. I played for it like a day, and then I got bored and never touched it again. And it's not that I didn't like the MMO aspect of it. It's just that RuneScape didn't interest me as much as, some of the other anime-looking MMOs that were out at the time.
This guy was out here playing MapleStory.
Degenerate.
Honestly, I do understand everything that you're saying when it comes to that impact. I would like to delve into it more, but that kind of takes away from my next segment. Um, so I just want to say that like I completely understand the group dynamic. Like everyone's first like really for their free multiplayer game that got them online and active is a very important thing. And you know, Wake has talked about it with his PSAS forum, so now you've talked about it with RuneScape, and I'm going to be talking about it as well in my own personal way.
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking onto that point, when I hear people talking shit about games like Fortnite, for example, I always think to myself, this is their PSAS, this is their RuneScape, right? These games that they're all playing together that are trending at their school, these are the games that are going to form the basis of these people who are going to play games for the next 10, 20 years, or whatever it might be, and they are going to look back on them in 10, 20 years the same way we are right now. This is the birth of their thing. It's these sorts of games, these games where everyone can play, no one's restricted, that they could just jump in and just enjoy together, and they just build these memories, and yeah, memories that last a lifetime, really. So yeah, just the way I always view those sorts of games that everyone rags on all the time. That for kids playing, I mean.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that take. Like we need those free games because we had those same opportunities. We have to make sure that everyone else gets them as well.
Yeah. All right. So before my segment goes on a bit too long, I'm just going to go over my honourable mentions. So it's going to pick 3 or 4. So for Overwatch, first of all, I think anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Overwatch fan. It's the game that got me into esports. Big London Spitfire fan. I have been since day one. I've put 400 hours into it, which I know may not sound like a lot to some people, but it's a lot for me. Huge fan. Never played anything like it. Enjoy it a lot. GTA 5. That I have put a lot of time into. I think it's over 1,000 hours now. I've been playing it since day one. So many amazing memories on there, just hanging out with friends, playing and enjoying, just doing wild and stupid shit, doing heists, things like that. It's just nothing like it, and I love it so much despite all its flaws. Bloodborne, sort of first game that got me into sort of like the Souls-like type game. I became dangerously obsessed with that game during my first year of university. I think my hallmates heard me very angry more than a few times, but yeah, that kind of opened up a new like sort of era of gaming to me. And Red Dead Redemption 2, absolutely incredible game. Most recent game to me that's had a major impact on me. It's my 3rd favorite game of all time. I could not heap enough praise on it, really. It's just such a well executed, such beautifully written game. And Mass Effect 2 as well. Last one I want to mention. It's got its flaws. It's not the best game in the world, but my god, I fucking love that game so much. I can quote it like just completely. Like I played the game like 6 or 7 times in the first couple months I had it. I could quote like basically the whole thing. I love the series so much, but 2 is just a peak for me, and so many incredible moments in it. All right, so enough of my section. Let's hear from Cora. What's the first game you'd like to discuss with us today?
Yeah, so anyone who's listening to this and my co-hosts here will see that there will be a lot of overlap in these games, or at least what we took away from these games. And I'm going to talk about these games in the form of stories, because this isn't a matter of quality in some instances. This is just a matter of right place, right time. So to set the stage for you, the year is 2008 or mid 2009. I am 13, about to turn 14 years old, and my father has decided to retire from the military, and we are moving across country from our home in Virginia to boonies of southwestern Oregon. To paint you the picture of the boonies, my town had a population of 1,000. My school class was 26. The only computer in our home was a brick that ran Windows XP, and the download speed was in the tens of kilobytes. That is the stage set for you for this middle school boy about to enter his first year of high school. No friends, because I haven't made them yet, and just sitting in a house in the middle of nowhere. So you get a little bit desperate. Um, I was a very social person. I met people through sport, and that wasn't available at the time. So I was just, aimlessly browsing the internet on my computer that was shared by the entire family. And by some providence, some miracle, I stumbled across a little game known as Critter Forge. What could I tell you about this game? It's nothing special. It's a little monster farmer that you put in a ladder and you try to get your name up on the highest point of the leaderboard as possible. In this game, um, I gained something very valuable. I gained the concept of an online friend. And I'm not talking about a friend that like you knew you moved away from and now you interact with mostly through text or online services. I'm talking about someone that you've never met before, and you might likely never meet in your lifetime. They're your friend. Right? You're playing the game together. You might be talking about some stuff going on in your life. Um, might just be shooting the shit, but it's just somebody that you do consider your friend. And back in those days, you don't give away your name. So I don't think anyone that I would call my friend on that platform ever knew my name, and I don't think I knew any of theirs. Shout out Rock P, shout out all those guys that I would never be able to find them because we were all clamped shut on internet privacy. So the game itself wasn't overly important. It was simple. It didn't take a lot of bandwidth. It didn't take there was a lot of idle components to it that I didn't have to actively follow, and it was mostly just as a chat portal for me to socialize with people in this kind of isolated area. Um, so those, and once that kind of dam broke, where I was introduced to that concept of an online friend, um, kind of path wound me into other, gaming sites, chat rooms, forums, places like that, where etiquette's already been established. Um, I'm already like warmed up to that idea, and that in twists and turns and winding roads led me here to people that I consider my friends, in a room where I've only personally met one of them, but that doesn't really make a difference to me. Um, Clearly that wasn't too rambly, but that's chapter one of Critter Forge.
Yeah, that's it's quite similar to how I described the whole RuneScape thing, isn't it? It's amazing how one game, one choice, one action, one moment can, in the moment, you never would have guessed, but it could just change everything and change your moment, and just that's the power that games have. Doesn't even have to be an amazing game. It could just change your life just out of nowhere and just send you down a road that's even affecting you to this day. It's quite beautiful in a way, really.
Talking about, finding online friends in these games, it reminds me of my times on. I consider the games to a certain extent, but like the social platforms like WeWorld or Gaia or Club Penguin. And the reason why I consider them games also is because, they have the little mini games to play with people. And I remember, how it was nice to just get online and then be able to talk to this person that you don't even really know. They could be an older person, a younger person, but at that time they were whatever their name was, and they were your friend.
Yeah, I used to play a bunch of like, especially on Congregate when I moved over there after kind of those Crater Forge servers started to die. I would just play idle games, or games that required very minimal interface with myself, and I would mostly just be in the chat window, typing away.
It's kind of funny though, because like obviously with all the games that we've mentioned so far, I've all heard of them, but I've never heard of this Critter Forge before. Is it what was it? Was it a PC game or a browser game or?
It's just this little browser game. On it was by this random company called EdgeBee. I don't actually know when it came out. I think it came out pretty like the first video. I see a tutorial. Oh, I see a soundtrack post from 2010. I think it was. Yeah, it's gone now. It no longer exists, and so it's very difficult to find information on it in hindsight. But yeah, it was just this little dinky browser game that my computer could load. That was like the biggest win for it.
Okay, good old free to play browser games. They're a savior of many. For those of us who didn't have particularly powerful PCs back in the day, or or families couldn't afford a console or anything like that, they were a good old gateway to get in there. Okay, so what about game number 2 for you, Cora?
This one also will come in the form of a story because I think that will um, just illustrate why I picked it. So this is also a right place, right time game. You set the stage. I believe it is 2017. Um, 2016 or 2017. I'm pretty sure it's the summer of 2017 though. At this point, I am 3/4 of the way through my college career. I am now in the depths of real life effort to become gainfully employed after graduation. Make all of those hours and years of effort not go to complete waste. And I do not know specifically about the two of you, but I'm sure might relate, and many other people in that age group in that specific situation would relate to the dread that comes with the kind of reality that's coming your way, and the worry as to whether or not that you have been making the best choices at that time. And it kind of like, fills your stomach with a little pit of anxiety. And I was kind of going through that. I was starting my first internships, I was getting a taste of industry, and I was terrified that I was going to hate it. So, a friend of mine, we all lived in a house, there was 5 of us, and I was in charge of the internet bill. We would all pay each other. A friend of mine was unable to get a job, and he said that he would pay us back when he got hired, which was fine. He owed me about $600 to $700. He got his job, and he said that he was going to give me the money back. I said I was thinking about buying a PS4 with that money, and he's like, I'll just buy it for you and some games, and we'll call it good. We went to Walmart or Best Buy or Target, whatever was nearby, and I was just kind of checking out some games. And the PS4 came with, I think, the Call of Duty that had Kit Harington in it as like the evil Martian.
Infinite
That was
Warfare.
kind of a funny, yeah, that was kind of a funny story mode. I played that a bit. I think I might have gotten Persona 5 at that time, but the important game for this discussion is Nier Automata. Um,
Ooh, I can't wait to hear
yeah.
about this.
So I'm not going to go into excruciating detail, but my personally, from my own experiences and opinions, find that the main thesis of Nier Automata is existentialism, and I think that the question posed in that game is, what do you do when God is dead? Which is, a very literal interpretation of, I don't remember if it's Nietzschean or Carl Jung, but one of those German philosophers from the 18th, 19th, 20th century proposed of what do you do when you realize that purpose is not given to you, something that you have to find. And if you've played the game, there's a lot of absurdity in it with the side quests of these robots that are trying to determine, that have been enemies for generations, trying to determine what to do when they no longer are receiving orders and no longer given mission directives. What are they doing in the meantime? Are they having breakdowns? Are they finding new purposes? Um, what is happening to those individuals on a day-to-day case-by-case basis? And
Yep.
I think that in that specific moment, I was feeling at my one of my most insecure towards the future. Um, that level of absurdity, ability to kind of like even laugh at it. Um, I couldn't go into specifics anymore because it's been several years since I played the game, and some of them I believed were a bit harder than others. Um, certain boss backstories, certain side quests, whatever. But I think that I would still put that game in my top 10. Um, it, I enjoyed all the different points of view. I enjoyed the characters, and I especially enjoyed the very end where you're going through the credits and you have your little Galaga ship. You're getting absolutely annihilated, and then after a few times of failing, some other ships come with you, start shooting up the director's name and all of the different cast members and everyone that worked sound and everyone that worked design. And anytime one of those little ships get hit, you see a name, and then they disappear to be replaced by someone else. And you fight valiantly up the credits until you finally get to the end, and then you get presented with the choice of whether or not you want to sacrifice your save data in order to make somebody else clear the ending of the game. I think that that's a very fascinating, very creative way to end the game, because I myself wanted to immediately go back and start getting my platinum. And I was confronted with the fact that I would it be better if I just restarted my game? If I gave the effort to somebody else so they could finish. And I'm sure that the ending that everyone listening to would hope for is that I also give away my save data. But unfortunately, you'd be wrong. I said no. I booted up the game. I started going through the endings. Then I don't think I finished it again, which I don't know if that's poetic or not. That's how it ended.
I just want to say I did the exact same. I said to myself, no, I want to platinum the game. No, I want to I want to do extra stuff. I think I played it for like another hour, then never touched it again. I had major regrets that I never sacrificed my data. I told myself in the moment, I need this. I need to keep going, but like I didn't. So yeah, I feel a bit bad about that one.
Yeah. But I think in a way that, like, I don't think that there is a right or wrong answer to that question. Did you have an add-in? 'Cause-
Yeah, this is shocking to me because I know that both. Well, I didn't know that this game was special to you, but I know it's special to Para. And I actually completed all the endings, and it's one of the games that I still. Well, hearing you speak kind of changes my opinion, but at the time I thought it was overhyped, not overrated, but overhyped. And, hearing you talk about it gave a little more context to it, but I'm surprised that you guys didn't complete all the endings. And here I am, completed all the endings, and I'm very critical of the game, but not for its art form, I guess.
Well, and I maybe Para would agree to me. In the end, I didn't finish the game because life came at me. I just didn't have the time. And by the time I did have the time, I was pursuing other games. I went overseas on a trip. It never came back around again. And we'll cover your personal biases because I know that this was the main rival for Persona 5's 2017 Game of the Year award. I know that it's a very personal moment for you.
I think I need to jump in
So
here. I don't think it was nominated, was it?
yeah, it was. I believe it was nominated.
Oh,
I do remember having this conversation.
It was.
No.
Was it? I feel like we've been over this before. We found out, like, or was it Horizon that wasn't nominated? No, Horizon was definitely nominated.
Okay, yeah, one of them did miss out. Oh, now I have to go look.
I'm almost
this is
certain it wasn't because
nasty.
2016 was that the year the Switch launched?
Oh, yeah, no, it was Super Mario Odyssey. No, why was
Breath of the
PUBG
Wild
yeah.
won the VGA Game of the Year. I know Odyssey was also up. Persona was up. Horizon was up.
Yeah, you're right. We have had this conversation. Maybe it was a PlayStation specific award, but I do distinctly remember back in 2017 there was an argument for what was the better game between the two. And I do remember quite quick, kind of polling bunch of people that he knew played both games, trying to get their opinions on it. And I remember saying that at that moment, I liked Nier more. I would stand by that, and I think I would also place Persona 4 Golden above Persona 5, both Persona 5 and Royal, if that's relevant.
Oof.
Yeah, I remember that we did have a debate, but I can't remember exactly what came of it. And I also remember because at that time it was also when Cuphead came out, and I was arguing for best art direction.
Yeah, I remember this. No, keep going on. Sorry, I was just wanted to laugh.
Oh no, I'm done.
So for those of you at home, basically, Quick was absolutely convinced. Sorry, Oecus was absolutely convinced that Persona would be Cuphead to the Best Artistic Direction award. Now, don't get me wrong, Persona 5 Royal, having played it since then, has incredible art direction. It was never in a million years going to be Cuphead, though. Let's be real about this. So that was a source of a bit of comedy around about that time. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So to kind of expand the conversation, since I wrapped up and we kind of just got into the overhyped or perception of the game. Per, I know you liked it. What do you think of? Was that a point in your life ever where you felt a bit like anxious about the future? Did you find like a comfort game in that moment? Because maybe I know you graduated a little bit before I did, so maybe this kind of missed your window.
Well, so if we're talking graduation, it's not a game strictly speaking, but during that final year of uni where I was doing my dissertation or whatever it is you want to call it, making my video game, it was Overwatch League that got me through that. So that's not a specific game, but it was esports. And the thing was, back when the league first aired, it was all based in Los Angeles, so the timing was not great. But back then, I stayed up till like 6 in the morning every night anyway. So I would be there, with my lamp on, 2 a.m. coding my game while having Overwatch League in the background, watching hours and hours and hours of this game. So that kind of got me through my final year, because this was also, I was at home at the time. I wasn't renting accommodation in my final year of uni, so I was just kind of sat at home on my own in my room with London Spitfire playing in the background while making my incredibly mediocre game. But yeah, I think that's my kind of equivalent as far as graduation is concerned, I would say. But even though it's not strictly speaking a game, but kind of along the same lines.
Call it a game, because in lieu of playing, we were watching because you didn't have time. At least that's my interpretation. I think that's perfectly acceptable to call a game. But you, Quick, did you ever have a moment where you felt a certain way, and then you played something and it kind of addressed it, or something that you could really identify with on a personal level, even if you don't relate to it anymore? Perhaps, oh, perhaps not. Anyways, I'll rattle off some of my honorable mentions.
Wait.
Go ahead.
I thought I clicked the button. All this time I was speaking. So yeah, I was trying to say that I don't think I really have a game like that, but I will say that I did mention it, but I would have to give a similar experience to that to Journey. And the reason why I give it to Journey is um if I recall, the reason why I bought the game is that I saw that it was winning awards for its art and stuff like that and music. And I wanted to give an indie game a chance, just try out the indie game. And I started playing through the game and I was just like, wow, this is a beautiful art. Like, I consider it a moving art piece more than a game because there's no win loss, there's no real I mean, there is an objective, but it's not like in your face that you need to do this. It's just you going through a journey. And along the way, when you play the game, you meet with random players that they don't even tell you the name of the person. There's no way for you to really interact with them besides chirps. And while you're going on this journey, you just meet these random people that will either try to show you, how you need to continue forward or where you can find this little hidden scarf. And I just remember playing through that game and meeting these people and just feeling like a sense of, friendship on this journey. And once the game finally goes to its climax where, well, I want people to play, so I'm not going to say much more than that, but once it gets to its climax, it just left this huge, beautiful impression on me, and I just started crying completely. Like I've never cried at a game like that, besides probably The Last of Us, but that was due to story reasons. Journey just made me cry, period. Like I can't even equate it to something. I just started crying. And like I said, to this day, if I listen to the soundtrack, I can start crying again.
Hold on just 1 second. Didn't you cry over Life is Strange?
Oh yeah, that's another story. We're not talking about that one.
Right, cool. All right, just wanted to get that out there. All right, so Cora, why don't you go over your honorable mentions then, since we've rambled on long enough.
Sure. Shout out League of Legends for ruining my life. Shout out
Nice.
the Civ series, and Total War for helping me expand upon my interest in history. Especially for especially leaders that were not Eurocentric. It definitely got me more into Asian and African history, and Middle Eastern especially, through those avenues. I guess to shout out early COD, or allowing for so many people to have an avenue to have sex with my mother. Yeah,
Nice.
nice. That's it for me.
Awesome. All right, so there's a lot of interesting discussion there. I think what I think interested me the most is the variety of ways that our different games impacted us. It's not just one thing or another. It's all sorts of different things. They could introduce you to a certain thing, or they came at a specific time in your life that was critically important and just played a role at a specific time. I think that is one of the beautiful things about video games, really, isn't it? Is it's just got that ability to just impact you in so many different ways. And I think it's fair to say, for the sort of person who gets through a lot of games per year, 99% of games aren't going to leave that much of a lasting impression on you. It doesn't mean they're bad. They could be really good games, but you don't necessarily walk away thinking, oh my god, I'm going to remember that forever. Like, I'm certainly like that with something like God of War, for example. It was an amazing game. I remember very little about it because it didn't have that much of an impact on me. But a game that is objectively worse could end up sticking with me forever just because it came at the right time, or it led me to see a certain thing. Like, I know, for example, some people have met their spouses through games, and things like that. The incredible impact that some of these games can have is just amazing, and I think we've got a nice variety here today of sort of what these these sort of games can do to you, and across different eras as well. It's not even just necessarily games we played as kids. There's a few more recent ones in there as well, sort of to add to the mix. So yeah, well, that kind of goes over everything we want to discuss. I see Oecus might have something to say.
So I just wanted to say, you speaking on and the topic of this of games as an impact of people is one of the reasons why I will never understand why video games are looked down upon to a certain extent. And I wish people realize that video games are essentially, I mean, there's, the fun video games where you play games, but they are the same, equated to books to me, or movies, or some of these more educational or informational things, because they are a gateway to many things, from story to creativity to whatever.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's almost limitless possibilities, especially as technology grows, stories become more complex. In many ways, I heavily envy the kids of today, because the games they're growing up with, the tools they have available to them. If you think about how prominent cross-platform is now, for example, there's no barriers between playing with your friends. So back back when I was a kid, I had Call of Duty on the Wii and the PC. I wasn't able to play with everyone else because everyone else had it on Xbox. And nowadays that wouldn't be a problem, because it's just because they have access to things like that, and and in many ways, as much as I would never trade in my past for anything, I'm kind of jealous of the expanded suite of things they have access to, and like the things they're going to grow up and the memories they're going to make.
At least we had Pokemon when it was better.
You had Pokemon. I've got no experience of Pokemon other than hearing everyone complain about it every 2 years. All right, so sorry.
Oh no, it's just muting to laugh. Put in the comments what game changed your life, huh?
Yeah, put them right down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. But yeah, no. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up. We've gone over our 2 games each. We've gone over our honourable mentions, and I think we've had a lot of good discussion here today. So thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. I've been Parasloth. This has been Cora.
So long.
And Oecus.
Adios.
And we will see you at the next episode, which could potentially be a VGA focused episode. It depends on when we record. I certainly intend to do something like that prior to the Game Awards, which are in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. But obviously, we will keep you updated on that on the Discord. And yeah, until next time, see you later.